it was 399 BC. An aging Socrates, probably 71 by the time, was due for trial. His crime? Well, his accusers, namely Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon, had charged him with impiety, speaking against the gods, and corrupting the youth of Athens. These charges seem made up, don't they? Well, that's because they are. The actual charges were unmentionable, since, in an effort to put an end to the hatred and hostility developed within Athens during the war, the government had banned any public mention of specific war crimes. But what war are we talking about? Was Socrates actually guilty of these charges? And was his trial fair? To understand that, we will have to go a bit further back, probably some 32 years. The Peloponnesian War was a war fought in ancient Greece between Athens and Sparta, two of the most powerful city-states in ancient Greece. It lasted for around 26 years. The result? It shifted power from Athens to Sparta, making Sparta the most powerful city-state in the region. And yeah, not to forget, it also helped establish a pro-Sparta oligarchy in Athens, known as the 30 Tyrants, that killed almost 5% of the Athenian population, confiscated property from citizens, and exiled anyone who supported democracy. The oligarchy lasted about 8 months before it was overthrown, and democracy was restored. But despite democracy being restored, Athens was never the Athens that it used to be. The social fabric was in pieces. Hostility and animosity reigned supreme. Now you may feel compelled to ask, how does any of this relate to Socrates? Well, here's how. Two of the 30 leaders of the oligarchy, namely Charmides and Critias, were former students of Socrates. And although there is some evidence suggesting that the relationship between Socrates and his former students had deteriorated by that time, having been associated with a tyrant and an enemy of the state in any form, let alone as their teacher, was deemed enough evidence to be convicted of crimes against the state. And this brings us back to the actual charges leveled against Socrates. The specific war crimes that Socrates was accused of were that with the aid of Charmides and Critias, and also another one of his favorite students, Alcibiades, who had betrayed Athens in the war. Socrates had conspired to bring about a counter-revolution against the Athenian democracy during the war, and was now, even after the end of the war and the defeat of Athens, continuing to incite the young men of Athens to revolt against the democracy. And so, Socrates was put to trial. But it should be noted that the Athenians had no desire to impose a death sentence upon him. Instead, the trial was intended to frighten Socrates, forcing him to leave Athens so that he would not continue to weaken the morale of the exhausted democracy that was already struggling to get back on its feet after the oligarchy. To avoid the eventual death penalty, Socrates had several options at hand. He could have had left Athens before the trial began. If not that, he would have been acquitted if he had shown any regard to the democratic feelings of the public and of the jury, or if at least he had not openly shown his contempt for them. As a matter of fact, he would have been acquitted despite the hatred if he had proposed, when requested, a moderate fine for himself. But Socrates chose none of the above. The result of his trial is well known. He was sentenced to death by drinking the poisonous hemlock. He had an easy opportunity to escape after his sentence, since he was detained for a month before he had to drink the hemlock, and no one would have blamed him for escaping. But he refused even that, because it was his firm belief that to escape or to propose any penalty or fine, however little, would mean admitting guilt. He argued that it would be legally and morally wrong to escape, since every citizen of a state has entered into a social contract to obey its laws. And he also argued that individuals who disobey the laws of their own society tear away at the foundation of group life. This was the Socrates who was deemed to be a risk for the nation. hell-bent on following the laws of his state, taking a stand for what he considered to be legally and morally right. And this brings us to the question, was Socrates guilty of the charges leveled against him? Was he really a threat to the Athenian democracy? It's tough for us to say. Throughout history, different people have had different perspectives on this issue. Some philosophers see the trial and death of Socrates as representing the hostility and indifference of the masses towards philosophy and philosophers. Another interpretation is made by political scientists who see this event as a symbol of the power of the state over the individual and his freedom of inquiry. And this issue is furthered by the fact that Socrates did not leave behind any written works of his own. All that we know about him is through the biased lens of people who either admired him or envied him grossly. As an example, we might look at the works of two of his students, Plato and Xenophon. While Xenophon gives rise to the perception of Socrates as a pro-oligarchic ideologist who aroused hostility towards the Athenian constitution in his associates, the Socrates of Plato respects the laws of Athens and wishes for nothing but the well-being and the welfare of Athens, as he calls upon everyone to make perfection of the soul the supreme concern of their existence. Which of these interpretations is the most appropriate, we might never know. You might feel inclined to believe that Socrates was martyred for his purity, or you may believe he was simply hated for his intelligence. You may think that his death is an example of the oppressive power of the state, crushing the individuality of his free spirit, or you might opine that he is a defender of aristocracy who came into conflict with the democratic government. His legacy, as might be evident by this point, is up in the air. But what cannot be refuted is the fact that Socrates truly is the pioneer of teaching the techniques of rational thought and emphasizing the importance of questioning dogma and authority. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing for more thought-provoking content. And here are some more philosophy-related videos that you might find interesting.